Hello, this is Ben. Today we will be talking about street tech, how to cheat on the street. Anyway, there's a way to pick power on the block, even a stock block. You don't have to buy a lot of these aftermarket things. In fact, our subject will revolve around when we ran that Factory 5 series, which required that you run stock block like an RHO block from the factory, and you can't really do too much of any modification. No aftermarket piston, stock rods, stock everything. Actually, even requires a stock camshaft. Anyway, no porting. That said, when we ran this series, we started running away from everybody. We had to really back out just to because they could look at our engine and say, oh, these guys are doing something illegal. But once they took apart the heads, they looked at it. Nothing's abnormal. There's no porting involved, but there are work done to it. They look at the top of the block. They pulled the heads out. The pistons are stock. They didn't see anything there. And that was it. But you're starting to wonder why we're so fast than everybody else. So again, let's start with this, and I will shed light on how we accomplish that thing. Now, there's a lot of people there that are building LS engines. I mean, I see guys buy LS engines, put it on their race cars or street cars, whatever, put turbo, nitrous, or whatever, and blow it up, and oh, back to the junkyard, grab another one, and there's a cottage industry of junkyard LS engines out there. And I tell you what, I'm surprised there's not much in the Fords. Okay, but there is a lot of Ford parts out there. And what I'm going to shed light here in this discussion is that I like you guys to look at how you can go fast with a small block Ford. And this also applies to a small block Chevy, okay, the older generation. Now, that said, the first thing I did on our so-called legal crate engine, took off the heads and the valve angle here. They come from the factory on a 45-degree angle like this. Now I took that system and I switched it over to a 30-degree angle. What I did was I flattened the valve angle. So when you open a 45, okay, that's the opening that you're gonna see, or more like here, okay? Now when you flatten the valve, guess what happens? You get a bigger window because it's a shallower valve angle. So when you put a 30-degree seat, your low lift flow improves. And since you're running a stock cam, so you're under 500 lift, actually 485 or 483, I think, on a stock HO roller. When you have a 30-degree, it make it look like it's got a lot more lift because the valve angle is flatter. Your low lift flow and everything picks up. In fact, you should never discount a 30-degree valve angle, even on some mild builds, okay? But there is power to be realized. Now, with that, so now I switched the valve angle to 30, power went up, okay? And a lot of people will probably realize, like, oh my God, this thing's got a lot more response. Sure, because it's got a lot of low lift flow compared to a 45. So that's +1. Second, okay, the piston. This Ford pistons, like this, 4 eyebrow design. And when you notice is that I made the little dot. I highlighted that there. And Fords and Chevrolets have a lot of these on their factory blocks. In fact, some of them with the stock rebuilds. That dot signifies that has to go to the front of the engine, okay? What I've done is that I reversed that. I put this dot towards the back of the engine. What have I accomplished with that? What I've accomplished is that, if you notice, the pin is offset to one side. It's not dead center, okay? Not dead center at all. Now, when you reverse the piston, put the dot towards the back. What's going to happen there is the engine is going to think it's got a longer rod because it's an offset pin center. So the piston is going to dwell a little bit longer on TDC. At high RPMs, it's going to hold that position a little longer while the gases expand before it pushes down. More power, maybe 8 or 9 horsepower. It's something, okay? The only thing that I caution people is that next time you look at your stock block, please don't do this, reversing the piston on a block that is tired or a lot of bore wear or the skirts are somewhat wore out. Do it on a fresh block, okay? Because you're going to have a lot of piston rock because it becomes wobbly in there. And I've done that before as a matter of experiment on a high mileage 302 HO. I flipped the pistons and I fired up and you hear it go clunk, 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 clunk. You can hear it a little bit when it's cold, but once it warms up, it's okay. Got a little bit more power. Actually, you know, we compared with another friend of mine, it's to start pulling away a little bit. We always have a dummy car. That's what you call a street racer dyno. We got the same similar car and we always compared. We have our basic car that we check everybody against. Okay, so that's important. So you just flipped it, you gain a little bit more power, 9, 10 horsepower, something like that. In fact, Ford did mention something before in one of their high performance sites where reversing the piston gives you about 9, 10, 11 horsepower. Okay, so now, second, here, the piston, the oil control ring. When you look at this oil control ring, you notice that one there, the ends. Okay, let me focus that better. The ends on the oil control ring, they butt together like this. Okay, when you install on the piston, they butt together and then the upper and lower rail, ring rail comes in. What it does is this little spring action forces the rails on the cylinder wall to control your oil control really for the piston. So when that's there, there's a certain amount of tension, and when you put that, and I suggest that you guys try this, with a stock rail on the piston, put it upside down on the block. Okay, there's the deck block, and then just feel how much drag it has. All right, now grab another piston and do this. The end that's butted together, take some pliers, bend that this way, and then the other side, bend it this way. So now instead of going like this, they're like this. Okay? What happens there is the rail that's tensioned up outwards is suddenly less. You slip it back to the piston, put it back on the block upside down, and if you have a fish scale, you can see how much pounds it freed up. But I tell you what, as soon as you try to go up and down with the stock rail, and then you try this, it's very light. Okay, the other ones you're gonna have to put a lot of arm muscle there to go up and down, and here you just go like this, and it frees it up. What happened there? I started doing that on a lot of engines, and I tell a lot of the guys who's tending more towards the high performance side of engines, even though it's a stocker, they go, hey, give me as much as you can power wise. That is big. How big? I've measured stock 302, 351, Chevy, small block, and at 100,000 miles, 150, 200,000 miles, I put a torque wrench and see how much it takes to turn the whole crankcase, the crank assembly, and it goes from 35 to 45. Okay, 35 to 45. That's how much it takes to rotate the crank rods and pistons as they are tired. Now, when you do this, you're going to find out it's between 12 to 15 foot-pounds. That's big, okay? You've gained about 20 foot-pounds of additional torque on the engine to go to the flywheel instead of trying to fight the doggone ring drag. So when you gain that much, again, that's a plus. You will find this crank's so much stronger. It turns so much quicker, all right? Here's another option. What I'm saying here is not for everybody, okay? But if you're really dead serious about beating your buddy out there on the block, or just making the most out of it, and I've run single piston rings, and notably years ago with Storm & Norman's 302, 347 actually, with the prototype twisted wedge heads. It wasn't even called twisted wedge heads then. It was a high port, much modified, welded and everything, valves switched over, and before it became known as twisted wedge, we work on that. And next time I'll bring the piston here. It was a single ring 347. That's a race car. Here on your max effort stock motor, I take off the second ring. You heard that? Took off the second ring. What that does is that, well, wait a minute. People will say, well, you can't do that. You lose compression. No. Second ring is not a compression ring. It's an oil control ring. Okay? And when you do that, you've freed it up again. Okay? Rotational drag is significantly reduced. Now you mess around with your oil control ring, and now you took off your second ring. And you know what? I don't care about oil consumption. It will not consume. If the bore finish is good and everything, it's hardly noticeable. Okay? And when you have an oil control ring that's there for 100,000, 200,000 miles, are you going to be running that engine that long? I bet you go through left and right, open it up. Knowing us hot rodders, we constantly open it up and change the rings or whatever. I don't care if that oil ring is not going to last 200,000 miles, because it's not going to make 200,000 miles. It's a bracket motor, or it's my hot dog engine running around like an idiot. But anyway, loosen up the oil ring, dislodge of the second ring. It's not for everybody, but if your block is in good shape, try it. I've done that with race motors. Okay, when guys call me up and says, "Ben, I need a little bit more, just a tiny bit more." You know what? Okay, let's try this. Ditch the second ring. They go out. Oh my gosh, that doggone thing is a little bit quicker again. Sure, rotational drag. So here you go. Okay, second ring is gone. Now we go back to the crank. Like I said, LS engines, people buy them left and right. Blow it up, grab it out of a junkyard, put it in. Maybe they put a little mild camshaft or maybe a valve string change as well. They're out there running again and they blow it up. Repeat the procedure over and over. How about the 302 Fords, old Chevys? Lots of crank. I see guys with blocks that was turned into a coffee table. Funny looking thing, but hey, it's tricked out. How many people you have seen with cranks turned into lampshades? I see a lot of them. Okay, gearheads, that's normal for us. Ford cranks are cheap. You don't have to go to a junkyard. I bet you some of your friends got tons of them laying around their garage. Okay, same thing with Chevy cranks. Now, you get the stock Chevy crank. American bearings are Clevite, all those other, TRW, Speed Pro. What I use, they go down to 30 under. So you knock down your rod and main to 30 and a less rotational drag, okay, smaller bearing diameters, hydrodynamic drag is what they call it, right? It's a little lighter to turn. I've used, if still available today, it's been years since I've done this. There's a company that makes Mexican Clevite bearings called Clemex, C-L-E-M-E-X. It's Clevite, Mexico. They go all the way down to 40 and 50. 40 and 40 rod and main. So I knocked down the rods and the crank mains to 40 down. Amazing. Now you have a lot of less surface area, a smaller bearing diameter, then I run a stock pump with the lightest oil. So now you got a little lighter crank, less surface drag from the bearing. There you go. Perfect scenario. So now you got a light crank, smaller diameter bearing. It doesn't need as much. You notice when an engine's cranking and hardly any oil pressure yet, it cranks real fast. But once oil pressure catches, go, guess what? That's hydrodynamic drag. The more you can cut down on the surface area, the better off you're going to be. It doesn't take much. Okay? Next. Again, this is optional. Some of the max effort cars that we did, track only, and I know some guys out there do the same thing on the street. We cut off part of the impeller. So if you have 8 or 6 impellers in there, I knock every other one off, maintaining the balance. Make sure you cut it evenly. The water pump, all the veins in there, becomes a water brake. When your engine's at high RPM, that pump is forcing into the block, losing power. That's why you have underdrive crank pulleys. They're cutting down on drag. But if you do it internally, okay, you freed up that water pump. So if the rules say no underdrive pulleys, great. But you know what? I have half an impeller left in my water pump. Now, when we did that before, we used to fire up and go up to the starting line, and we're just about not really idling it too low because the doggone thing is going to run warm. Now, we don't care what it does at idle and low speed because we're always maxed out racing. At that point in time, the water pump's turning real fast and you have no issue with cooling, okay? Because that water pump was destined to and designed to cool at idle and cruising RPM. We don't care about that on a race car. We're hauling butt all the time. So now you've freed up the crank, you've freed up the piston, you've freed up the water pump. Here's another one. A lot of these new cars have a cutout switch on the throttle body, or some of the old carburetors. I think the 85 Mustang has a cutout switch. Yes. At high RPM, or when you're full throttle, the AC disconnects. Okay? It disconnects and boom, your alternator freewheels. What I've done, like on my 85, my AC switch is actually hooked up to a relay, and when I'm full throttle, it does disconnect my AC, but also disconnect and kills the field circuit on my alternator. How much is that? 8, 9, 10 horsepower? That's quite a bit, okay? Especially when you're road racing and you're trying to catch up the other guy and you freed up 8 horsepower or 10 horsepower, you're gonna, especially if you on a Cobra circuit, you're all even, but your alternator is cutting off in and out. And I tell you what, when you're in the straightaway for a bunch of seconds, you come off the gas, AC comes, the alternator starts charging again. Going through the corner, you're not full throttle, it's charging, and then straight away again, it disconnects. You can do this all day, and your battery will not go down. Okay? Same thing in drag racing. We're in the pits, boom, fire up, you idle up to the staging lanes, shut off, but the alternator will cut off the moment you're going down the track. It will not slow you down. You will run on battery power for that given small time. 12, 13 seconds, 14 seconds, hey, it could be 10 seconds, okay? You're not gonna run out of battery. Same thing on road race situation. So that smog pump is the next one, okay? We modified our smog pump on the side. It looks stock, but the back is modified. We have a fitting there, actually a hose fitting that goes into the crankcase. And what that does is I've turned the smog pump into a vacuum pump, especially when you're loosening up your rings and you create a vacuum. We were making like 5 or 6 inches, okay, with a closed up crankcase. 3 horsepower again, all right? You've done this, you've done that, and we got a vacuum pump working as a smug pump working as a vacuum pump. There you go. That's important. Now, also another thing is on the manifold. They have on the middle of the gasket, they have a hole in there for the EGR that brings heated air into your lower manifold to the upper manifold, sometimes to the bottom of the throttle body. That is heat soaking on the intake manifold. Bad news. Power loss. So what I do is Felpro and some of these stock type gaskets from Felpro and the others have an aluminum plate that you put on the gasket before you bolt down the lower manifold. That stops the EGR flow to the manifold. Good thing. Okay, cut the heat off so you got a denser mixture coming in. On top of that, on a stock block, especially on the Chevys, since the lifters are exposed, the capsule's turning and splashing the bottom of the manifold with hot oil. I put a little thin aluminum plate right between the lifter valley, aluminum plate, and then the manifold sits on top. I'm just trying to cut down the heat. Same thing with the 302 Fords. You still have the heat, okay, cooking the bottom of the manifold. I put an aluminum plate that I painted white, whatever that's worth. But I kind of figured anything I could do to cut the intake temperature down. So I block off the EGR, an aluminum plate that you could really make. Just go to the hardware store and just cut the pattern, okay, and silicone it on the ends, sandwich between the lower manifold and the valley is that aluminum plate. Voila. Your intake will run cooler. Another plus. Now, oil pump. No high volume pump, especially with a cut down bearing. Your requirements for oil is a lot less with a smaller diameter. So on a stock pump with as light of oil as I can run. 15 weight 30, 15 weight 40. Okay, if you're brave and you watch your clearances, you make it tighter, you can probably go close to 0 weight. All that is free horsepower. Okay, now, one cheat that we did before was I run a 289 rod on a 302 because a 289 rod is 115. Yeah, 150. Okay, it's longer by 65 thousandths than the 302 rod. So I run the 289 rod, okay, with a 289 with a 302 piston. What happens is that the piston sticks out about 60, 70 thousandths from the deck. Now, when you look at this ring packing, I think they're the distance of the top of the piston to the top of the ring is 275. Okay. Now, ideally, NA, you want that ring pack, and a lot of the Detroit's finally learned that ring pack, the more you bring it up, LS, Coyotes, all these new engines, the ring pack is all the way up. If I notice that compared to the engines in the 80s and the 90s, Fords and Chevrolets, the ring pack is all the way down like this, 275 from the top of the deck. So with a 289 rod, I take that and machine off, okay, the top of the piston, 65 or 70 thousand, so it'll be 0 deck. But now my ring is about 200 from the top. Ideally, you want 150. I'm 50 thousandths away from ideal. With a 200 thousandths top, you will gain power. It's called crevice losses. All these gases trapped in here after the exhaust event will contaminate the new flow coming in. Okay? It's like a built-in EGR. The lower the ring length is, it's a built-in EGR. So if you can cut part of that thing off, okay, and move the piston ring up, your crevice losses is substantially reduced, and you're going to see some power. Okay, so do that. So when you finally got an engine with no second ring, it's up to you. Some of you guys on the street will attempt this, I know that. Or you have the second ring in there, but your oil control ring has been lined up, your crank has been cut down, your rod's been cut down, okay? Your water pump has been freed up. You block your heat riser on the manifold base and also on the valley. You make a aluminum plate there. Advance the timing as well. Don't be afraid. Like Fords come from the factory, it says 10 degrees. Actually, when you get them at that time, they're like 8, all right? Put it up to 14. Don't be afraid. Up it. Now, what you're gonna see is you're gonna have a lot more response. And then when you're up at Willow Springs or here in Las Vegas, set it base timing, add another 2 on top of that. Don't be afraid. You will see that your power is gonna get back, all right? The factory lowers down for emission purposes, but now we're talking about hot rod stuff here. Okay, so you can kick up 46 degrees from baseline, and it's gonna come alive, especially when you're at high altitude. On the sea level track, let's say, or you're right there in LA by San Diego or whatever, and you bump your timing from 10 degrees that's cold by the factory to 12 or 13, excuse me, you're good. But usually I go 14. Okay, so that you've done, you would see. In fact, when I rotated an engine before without the second ring and the oil ring lightened up, I think it was like 10 or 12. It's amazing. Okay, so I haven't really gotten anywhere lower than that, except maybe if I switch to a what do you call this, low tension top ring, but I don't think they have anything for a stalker like that. You're gonna see something there. So did I forget anything here? Reverse piston. Okay, so you did all these things. You reverse the piston. All these things are gonna come into play. You didn't even touch the heads yet. Okay, so heat risers, all that. I mean, I tell you, you don't have to spend a lot of money. Follow these basic things. Some of you guys are probably bypass the second ring. That's fine, you could do that, but knocking down the rod and main, flipping the piston around, okay, all those things are 30 degree seats. All those are doable. It's not going to cost you a lot of money, and you're going to find out that in fact on that factory 5 we had to tell our driver to back off a little bit because it's pulling away. And people are getting suspicious, like, man, this thing. But they look, there's a smog pump there, but they don't know it's a vacuum pump. You know, what is illegal in racing? What is in the gray area? The way I look at it, it's only illegal if you got caught, right? But anyway, find the advantage where you can notice it and use it. On the street, there are no rules. If you do your neighborhood hot rod doing that thing, why not? Okay, you're gonna gain power, and it's gonna be worth it. So you start to wonder why this guy is so fast when he cheated on his block, or not really cheat, he was smart. Okay, anyway, please like Ben Alameda Racing on YouTube so we can keep this going, and subscribe, and you'll get notified when I put another new video, and I'll come back. I'll go back and forth between high-tech, hardcore racing tech and low-dollar stuff that I started like that. And if you guys continue on and get going, hey, one day you'll be out there too. Okay? So anyway, please subscribe and like Ben Alameda Racing. Thank you very much, guys. Keep in touch. Bye-bye.